Welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Romano. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the real estate sector. And I want to give an update as to what is going on, as well as my interpretation and what I was talking about in my previous video about the real estate market. Just because you're really good at making money in a certain industry, or you're really good at making money and you have made money for 10, 20 years, well, you rode a certain type of market. And that type of market is called a market cycle in the real estate sector. And that was based on our government changing their policies to help the public. In the mid-1990s, a president who was elected, he ran and won on the basis that he was going to get everyone into their own house and everybody was going to go to college. Unfortunately, it created a gigantic mess that's now about to burst. The first bubble was in 08 and 09. You've seen what happened. Everybody thought the markets would never come down, but they did. And they took a 20% drop. However, in certain areas in the US, that 20% was more like a 50% drop. And so to really say that the entire US only had a 20% drop in their real estate market is not true. Because what about small towns that the owners couldn't even sell their property for 10 years? Now, my parents were a perfect example of that. They couldn't sell one of their houses because it was a lot of money, and they weren't willing to take such a dive on it. So they kept it for 10 years, spending $10,000 a year in real estate tax. That's what, another $100,000 that they spent over 10 years in real estate tax, and never mind the upkeep for the landscape or everything else. So if you want that to happen to you, I think it would be a good idea to reevaluate your portfolio, whatever you own, and come up with a conclusion. You are not going to make money based on the equity anymore for a while. So I say this because I understand market cycles, and during the mid-1990s, as I mentioned, that president changed it to make it a lot easier for people to get loans. And so look what happened in 08 and 09, that everyone blamed the banks and Wall Street, and it wasn't the banks or Wall Street, it was the government allowing them to do what they did, because they did everything legal. That's how it is. So back then, if you knew what was going on, you could have taken advantage of it and you could have bought gold, because gold prices went up before the stock market collapsed. However, some people, they don't understand market cycles like a PhD graduate such as myself does. When stock market collapses, you buy the commodities, and when the real estate sector is collapsing, you hold off, let it collapse, and then you buy those foreclosures. Now, in this time around, it's very different than 08 and 09. The real estate is just... So we had a lot of foreign buyers that came into our country and bought a lot of real estate, okay? First, you had... It's kind of like globalization affecting everywhere. And a lot of countries such as Italy, France, Europe, Asia, they started making a lot of money because there was a lot of money being moved around. Before we continue the video, please remember, if you want to say thank you, Anthony, do thumbs up. It's right there. It's 2 seconds. You just click it and that's it. Thank you so much. And so people wanted to come to America to buy real estate, thinking that it was a stable market, and it is. But it actually affected the typical American because they have been priced out of buying their own real estate. Spending $600,000, $700,000 for a one-family house, you got to be nuts. You have to make a lot of money every year to afford that mortgage, and the factor, what if you can't afford that mortgage because you lose your job for 2 years? Exactly. So you thinking that you're going to sell that house immediately, no, it's not going to happen. Because you have to remember, when a cycle finishes, such as a real estate cycle finishes, there's certain places that aren't desirable in the US. I could understand new cities like in Texas, Colorado, Nevada, and many other cities that people are flocking to move there because it's cheaper than the bigger cities. But eventually that ends. And it ends really bad. That's why I want you to reconsider and think about the change that's happening and how you could take advantage of that, right? Isn't it better to sell now at the peak and hold off with cash? This way you could go in and swoop up a lot of real estate. Now, in the 2003, 2004, 2005 time period, a lot of developers in Manhattan, they stopped building and looking for more real estate. They literally closed their offices, or they were looking for real estate elsewhere, out of the country. Now, what had happened was, I questioned this, and I questioned why that is, but apparently they weren't too far off, because they were predicting the collapse would happen in 2006. But unfortunately, the government came in and they propped up the markets and they allowed the collapse to become even bigger by 2008. Now, what happened, you remember what happened. I'm sure you were alive back then. I mean, unless you're, I'm just kidding. So now you have to remember that the collapse that happened, it wasn't so bad. But unfortunately, now you have a bigger collapse that's happening because, the Russians have an issue that they're not going to come buy real estate in America. The government has been confiscating their wealth, okay? So what happens if Taiwan gets taken over by China? Will the US government do that to China as well? I just heard that the US government signed an agreement with China that they could continue buying real estate in America. How is that possible? Nothing makes sense right now. I don't even know if that's true, but that's what I heard on the news. What propped up our markets is not the public buying real estate. Yes, to a certain degree. But you have to remember now, a lot more people are renting, and so they've been priced out of the real estate market. So what's going to happen is that not so many people are going to be in a problem, have an issue. It's China. The developers, as I mentioned, in China came to America with that capital and they went for a shopping. They bought up everything in Manhattan. My whole neighborhood's all Chinese now. And those were the only people that could afford $2-3 million for a house, a basic house. So you have to understand that if they're not buying the real estate anymore because their developers don't have enough capital to even build the buildings that they were supposed to build, and what about all the people? They're afraid. Well, maybe that's what Ray Dalio is trying to say, that a 50% drop in the American market on average is quite possible. However, you have to remember that in 2008, that time period, they said that the real estate market dropped 20%. Yeah, it did on average throughout the US. But then what about those little villages and those little towns where it dropped 50%? And I have proof of this because of my parents. And also, my parents, they bought another house in Colorado Springs back then, and that market really dropped. So there's a lot of changes that's happening. Don't think that it's not going to happen. If you think that it's not going to happen, then I could guarantee you that you are very ignorant. And unfortunately, because you don't know what I know, and you don't understand how to analyze the markets like I know, then you're not going to believe it. But when you understand what I see, then of course you see that's reality. And that's the difference. Just like the reality of investing in hedge funds, everyone says it's bad. It is not bad. the hedge fund manager is more equipped at managing capital than a trader at an investment bank. Because the hedge fund manager went off on his own to build his own company. And his proof is in his returns. And so if he doesn't do good, he's not going to find capital and he'll go out of business, etc. Make sense? So that's where I want to focus on, is the real estate market. If China doesn't keep buying up our real estate, what's going to happen? That's probably what Ray Dalio is saying, that it's going to go down by 50%. But you have to also remember those small villages and towns, it'll probably go down 60 to 70% and a lot more. And there's probably going to be a lot more foreclosures because you have so many people owning so much real estate, meaning that they have 4 or 5 houses. So how are they going to afford the mortgage on 4 or 5 houses if those properties aren't rented, or I don't, whatever the situation is? Exactly. So this is a big problem right now, but you don't have to be scared. Prepare yourself ahead of time. A lot of people I know, they're selling their real estate, and that's because they realize that there has to be a bubble somewhere. It has to burst. But of course, where? However, because of our tax policies changing, and a year after the tax policy changes, there's a major recession. Well, so maybe it could happen in 2 years that the real estate bubble collapses. Who knows? With the interest rates going up and up and up, and if you don't understand why interest rates are going up and up and up, then listen to me, because I'm a doctor of finance. The government has printed so much money. In order to keep the government stable, meaning our currency and the government debt, they have to raise the interest rate so that more people buy the debt. Because as of now, it's a lot. And if other countries don't buy our debt because they can't afford it, because they have to pay their bills, exactly. So the government has to create what we had in the 60s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where you go to the bank, anyone buys a savings bond and earns 7%, 8%, whatever it was, or invest in a CD. So that's the next step that you could also put your money into. Not real estate. You have to wait until the real estate market goes down. And part of being an entrepreneur is taking chances and realizing that changes do happen. And when you see those changes, you dive in. And so those are the changes that I see that's happening. Is that, yes, our real estate market's going to have a bubble soon. The stock market is supposed to have a bubble soon. We're still waiting for it. In other videos, I mentioned the stock market will be at its lowest between mid-July and mid-August, no later than the first week of September. But so far, I'm almost right, because now it's going up. But you have to also be careful, because this is just a short-lived increase. On the first week of September, around that time period, the government comes out, people have their earnings come out, etc. And then the next time that we will have an issue is the end of October for the stock market. So be very careful right now. Secondly, if you took my advice and you bought your commodities when I made that video, you would have made a lot of money. See how much gold went up? And that's nothing compared to what it will go up. Because you have to remember that the governments around the world, they're having problems right now. You're having governments not being able to make their payments. Well, that's where the commodities market goes up. But the commodities market did go down only because there was a government selling a lot of gold to pay off their debt. I don't know if that was Russia. I don't know if it was China. It could have been Sri Lanka. Who knows? But the point is that there's a lot of systemic risks in the world. And because of globalization, it even increased that even further, that when a government collapses on their loans, it affects America as well. And so you have to be very, very careful with your stock market portfolio. Don't leave it up to the professionals at the investment bank to do it. No, I'm so sorry, but look what happened in '08 and '09. My sister-in-law and a lot of people lost over 40–50% of their portfolio. And they cashed out, they took the loss, and what did they do? They went and bought an apartment building. So now, of course, that apartment building is a lot more money. They've been collecting rent and it's probably paid off almost. Exactly. So you have to accept these changes that happen and take advantage of them. And remember, always buy your gold coins. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like my videos and you want to subscribe to my channel, please do so. I would really like that. Please do thumbs up if you like my content, and that will let me know that you enjoyed it. And if you want to share the video with your friends and family, you could use the share button. It's right there. And finally, if you have any questions, send me messages to a live chat and I'll make future videos just for you. Thank you so much for watching.